Summary, Atlas of the Heart, Mapping Meaningful Connection in the Language of Human Experience by Brené Brown. Introduction, Mapping the Emotional Landscape. Brené Brown's Atlas of the Heart, Mapping Meaningful Connection in the Language of Human Experience is an expansive and insightful exploration into the complex emotional terrain that defines the human experience, drawing upon 2 decades of research in psychology, vulnerability, courage, shame, and empathy. Brown crafts work that is both scholarly and deeply personal. The book's central thesis is that emotional language is foundational to building meaningful connections with ourselves and others. By categorizing and defining 87 emotions and experiences, Atlas of the Heart becomes both linguistic and psychological map, helping readers navigate what it means to feel, connect, and be human. Rather than presenting linear argument or narrative, Brown organizes the book thematically. Each chapter is titled Places We Go When, followed by an emotional or psychological condition such as things are uncertain or too much, or we compare. Through this structure, Brown invites readers to see emotions as internal destinations that we all visit, whether willingly or not. Naming and understanding these places, she asserts, can transform our lives. Emotional literacy and the importance of language. Brown opens the book with powerful assertion: language matters. The ability to name our emotions accurately increases emotional granularity, term from psychological research that refers to our capacity to identify and differentiate between emotions. Most people, Brown says, can name just a handful of feelings: happy, sad, angry. That human experience is far more nuanced. When we lack the language to describe what we're feeling, we are more likely to act out or shut down. Conversely, emotional literacy leads to better regulation, empathy, and connection. She emphasizes that this is not just about vocabulary. It is about developing an inner awareness and interpersonal clarity that allows us to communicate effectively, show up authentically, and build trust in our relationships. Brown combines scientific evidence, lived experience, and cultural observation to show how limited emotional vocabulary can impair mental health and relational well-being. Thematic overview: the places we go. 1. Places we go when things are uncertain or too much. This opening chapter explores emotions such as stress, overwhelm, anxiety, worry, avoidance, excitement, dread, and vulnerability. Brown unpacks how each of these experiences differs and why it matters to distinguish them. For instance, she explains that stress is a physiological response to perceived threat or challenge, while overwhelm is more about cognitive overload that leaves us immobilized. Anxiety, she notes, is more persistent and internal, whereas worry is more cognitive and often problem-oriented. Vulnerability is central to Brown's work and features prominently here. She reaffirms her belief that vulnerability is not weakness, but the birthplace of courage, creativity, and connection. Recognizing our vulnerability and naming it allows us to engage more openly with the uncertainties of life. 2. Places we go when we compare. This section looks at comparison, admiration, envy, jealousy, resentment, and schadenfreude. Brown distinguishes between healthy admiration, which can inspire and motivate us, and envy or jealousy, which often lead to resentment or feelings of inadequacy. She also introduces cultural and familial narratives that shape how we experience and express these emotions, urging readers to examine the origin stories of emotional responses. Comparison, Brown argues, is default mode for many people, especially in the age of social media. It can drive disconnection and self-doubt. Recognizing comparison for what it is, distorted lens rather than a reflection of truth, can be liberating. 3. Places we go when things don't go as planned. Here, Brown discusses disappointment, expectations, regret, discouragement, and resignation. One of her most poignant observations is the distinction between disappointment and regret. Disappointment occurs when outcomes do not align with expectations, often outside our control, while regret involves recognizing that different choices could have led to better outcome. She asserts that regret can be a teacher. Instead of shaming ourselves for past mistakes, we can use regret to gain clarity about our values and make better future decisions. This reframing moves us from fixed mindset to one of growth and resilience. 4. Places we go when it's beyond us. This chapter explores awe, wonder, confusion, curiosity, and interest. These emotions, often less discussed in psychological literature, are critical to our sense of purpose and meaning. Awe and wonder can lead to profound spiritual or existential insight. Curiosity fuels learning and creativity, while confusion signals cognitive dissonance that precedes understanding. Brown encourages readers to embrace these beyond us experiences as opportunities for expansion rather than fear. Being open to awe or curiosity requires tolerance for uncertainty, which ties back to earlier chapters about vulnerability and discomfort. 5. Places we go when things aren't what they seem. This chapter delves into amusement, nostalgia, cognitive dissonance, irony, and sarcasm. Brown explores how these emotions and states are layered and often mask deeper feelings. For example, sarcasm might serve as defense against vulnerability, and nostalgia, while often comforting, can also involve sadness or longing. By pulling apart these layers, Brown invites readers to examine the emotions of their reactions. Why do we default to irony or sarcasm? What does nostalgia tell us about what we value or miss? These questions deepen emotional understanding. 6. Places we go when we are hurting. Brown tackles anguish, hopelessness, despair, sadness, and grief. This is one of the most emotionally intense sections, but also among the most valuable. She stresses that grief is not a linear process, but multifaceted one involving denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, stages that often cycle and repeat. Brown encourages sitting with pain, bypassing it. She warns against spiritual or emotional bypassing, e.g., toxic positivity, which prevents authentic healing, recognizing grief in its many forms, not just after death, but in response to lost dreams or changes in identity, expands our capacity for empathy. 7. Places we go with others. This chapter focuses on connection-based emotions: love, trust, betrayal, hurt, defensiveness, compassion, and empathy. Brown defines love as practice rather than just feeling. An action rooted in trust, respect, and vulnerability. She introduces braving, an acronym that defines the elements of trust: boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, confidentiality, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. Each element is necessary for cultivating trust in relationships, whether romantic, familial, or professional. Empathy, hallmark of Brown's work, is described as a skill we can learn and refine. Unlike sympathy, which often creates distance, empathy fosters closeness by validating the other person's experience without judgment. 8. Places we go when we feel wrong. Brown unpacks anger, contempt, disgust, and dehumanization. While often viewed negatively, anger is portrayed here as a signal of moral violation. Contempt and disgust, on the other hand, are more corrosive because they involve seeing others as less than human. This section is deeply relevant in today's polarized world. Brown discusses how dehumanization enables systemic injustice and cruelty. Recognizing emotions in ourselves and others can serve as an early warning system, prompting us to act with more humanity and integrity. 9. Places we go when we feel shame, insecurity, and fear. Here, Brown revisits her signature work on shame and vulnerability. Shame differs from guilt in that guilt says, I did something bad, whereas shame says, I am bad. Shame is highly correlated with mental health issues and disconnection. She explains how shame thrives in secrecy and silence. Naming shame robs it of its power. She also explores fear and insecurity as related but distinct experiences, both of which can be navigated more skillfully with self-compassion and support. 10. Cultivating meaningful connection. In the final sections, Brown ties together the overarching purpose of the book, fostering deeper, more authentic connection. She argues that connection is why we are here. It is what gives life meaning, but connection requires willingness to be vulnerable, to understand ourselves, and to communicate clearly. Through better emotional literacy, we can dismantle the barriers that prevent connection: misunderstanding, judgment, disconnection, and silence. When we can name what we feel, we can share it. When we share it, we others in. That's how empathy works. Visual and design elements. One unique aspect of Atlas of the Heart is its visual presentation. Full-color photography, quote blocks, and diagrams enhance the text, reinforcing the metaphor of an emotional atlas. These design choices make the book more engaging and accessible while also giving it the feel of travel guide to the self. Conclusion: the power of naming. Brown concludes with call to action to become better cartographers of our emotional lives. She acknowledges that this journey is neither quick nor easy. It takes courage, curiosity, and willingness to confront discomfort. But the reward is profound: more authentic relationships, stronger sense of self, and life rich in meaning. Atlas of the Heart is not just a guidebook. It is an invitation to become more emotionally fluent, to show up more fully in our relationships, and to embrace the full spectrum of human experience. It is a book for anyone seeking to understand what it means to feel deeply, love boldly, and connect meaningfully.